Thank you for joining us for another Oilfield Strong webinar put together by PBPA and OTA Compression. We greatly appreciate you joining us this morning for a really exciting speaker. Congressman Will Hurd is joining us this morning. He's got a ton of experience in his 6 years, and of course the career that he had before joining Congress that he might speak about a little bit today, and we're just really enthusiastic to have him. Probably like many of you out there, Congressman Hurd never planned on being a member of Congress. He was excited to spend his entire career serving his country by stopping terrorists, preventing Russian spies from stealing our secrets, and putting nuclear weapons proliferators out of business as an undercover officer in the CIA. That part might be a little bit different than most of your backgrounds. But then he realized that his expertise in cybersecurity and intelligence was sorely needed in Congress. And he felt that call to join the ranks of those representing the people of the great state of Texas up in Washington, D.C. And since being elected in 2014, Congressman Hurd has blazed his own trail to deliver bipartisan results for the 800,000 Texans he calls his bosses by working with anyone, regardless of politics and party, to help make sure our kids are ready for the future, that our country is safe, and that the United States will always be the leader of the free world. After 3 terms in Congress, however, Congressman Hurd is now ready to move on to the next stage of his life. Maybe he'll share a little bit about that with us today. And also maybe he'll share a little bit. He recently celebrated a birthday, and like many of us had to do that in pandemic situations. So maybe he can share some pointers for everybody out there on how to do that properly. But Congressman Hurd, do you have anything you'd like to say to everybody to kind of kick things off?
Well, first off, Stephen, thanks for the invitation. And I've learned a lot about your sector since being in Congress, with the Permian being in my district and the Eagle Ford as well. This is an area that I've enjoyed getting to know and learning about. And in your introduction, the one thing you failed to say, the reason I got into Congress because I was pissed. Right? I got pissed with some of the people that I had met when I was in the CIA and having to brief members of Congress. I wish, had I met Mike Conaway, Mac Thornberry, Henry Cuellar, if I had met those guys when I was in the CIA, y'all wouldn't know my name because I'd still be in the CIA chasing terrorists and putting bad guys out of business. And so I was frustrated with the caliber of our elected officials, and so that's why I decided to run. And what's been fascinating is, you know, I'm never going to understand getting the molecule out of the ground and moving it from point A to point B as you and many of the folks that are listening to us today. But I've been talking about the national security implications that energy independence is allowing and affording the United States of America. When you look at some of our adversaries like Russia, Russia is not necessarily the global threat that they once used to be. I would say that they're more of a regional thug, but they use their energy policy in order to extort other countries in their region. And so the fact that we could be able to helping our allies with their energy demands and needs is important. I think Texas is an example of where we can increase energy production and protect the environment at the same time. We are a great example of that, and so we got to continue to promote that to folks that don't necessarily truly understand this industry. And depending on how elections turn out in November, it could be an existential threat to the community. And we also have to be mindful of adversaries trying to target our industries. We know Russians have been looking at some of our good energy companies. We also know that the Chinese are doing things to try to access our electrical grid, and we have to be concerned about the electrical grid because a lot of these producers are using some of the inputs that y'all are getting out of the ground. So it's a crazy world we live in. It's only going to get crazier. And I've enjoyed my time in Congress, but I'm looking forward to continuing to work at that intersection of national security, technology, and public policy when I'm done. I can't sign any dotted lines until I'm out of Congress, but I'll continue to be talking about these issues that I care about, and then help companies and entities make the largest global impact. And one thing I also want to add, the 23rd Congressional District, 29 counties, 2 time zones, 820 miles of the border between Texas and Mexico. It takes 10 and a half hours to drive across it at 80 miles an hour, which is speed limit in a lot of the district. And we have great things like McDonald's Observatory. McDonald's Observatory, if folks have never been, you should. They do these star parties. It's wild. About 80% of Americans have never seen the Milky Way because they live in places that are too bright at night. But there are, McDonald's Observatory is where it is. It's because it's the darkest place in the United States of America. And there's a dark skies initiative in the region to make sure all that ambient light is protected. And there are many folks that I'm sure are part of your association that are in the energy sector that are having an impact on the darkness at night. But there are steps that each one of these companies can do to fit in within this dark skies initiative. And so if y'all don't know about what it is, just search dark skies initiative. There are a lot of organizations that are trying to help and can advise you on your locations on things you can be doing to ensure that we don't impede the impressive research that's going on at McDonald's Observatory.
Absolutely, and I'm glad you brought that up because that's something that's actually very, very near and dear to our hearts at PBPA. And we came on the ground floor with the observatory to actually help develop the recommendations for lighting practices out in the community. And through our website, it's been up on there for I think a few years now. You can go and get those recommendations. So anybody out there in the industry that hasn't had a chance to go do that, hasn't had a chance to one, experience what it's like to actually go down to the observatory and do a star party, but also to take upon your shoulders the responsibility of reducing light pollution at night, please look into it and see what you can do.
Look, and it's wild what's going on out there. When we were in school, right, Pluto was a planet. Now it's not a planet. I'm pro Pluto being a planet, but I don't think Pluto's going to be a planet again. However, there is the 2 things that they're doing out at McDonald's Observatory is looking at dark energy. Again, when we were in school, dark energy wasn't a thing. And we know that 70% of the universe is dark energy, but we don't know what it is. And they're learning about it at McDonald's Observatory. And then they're also looking to find 1 million exoplanets. That is a planet that could potentially support life outside of our solar system. Again, when I was in school learning about what is it? My very educated mother just served us 9 pizzas. The phrase you use to learn the planets. Exoplanets weren't even a thing, and now we're looking for 1 million of them. It's crazy. So it's really cutting edge work that's going on out there, and we all have a role that we can be playing to ensure that West Texas is leading in this area.
And that's something that the oil and gas industry and the folks down there at the observatory have in common is that we are both doing cutting edge technology. We're both innovative in our own fields, and that's something that's really helped the Permian Basin be able to thrive over the years. But there are threats to the industry. One of them that you mentioned a little bit earlier was Russia. And in particular, right before the pandemic hit, we had that price war between Russia and Saudi Arabia. That who knows how that really would have crippled our industry by itself, but leading into the pandemic, that sure had a big impact on things out here. Being up in Washington, D.C., what did you see folks talking about? What did you see being pushed forward that you could have really gotten behind or you were concerned about as far as protection of those energy resources out here during the pandemic?
Well, look, I think what's so interesting about the industry is that there's so many other factors that the industry doesn't have control over that impacts the bottom line, that impacts operations. And look, we know that OPEC, the back of OPEC is broken. And it is broken because of the Permian Basin, right? Period. End of story. And so we need to be making sure that our foreign policy is in line with some of our domestic policies and ensuring we have a domestic oil supply. The thing that I thought was interesting was that in 1983, if something like this would have happened, you would have saw the prices of a barrel of oil, of gas, of other commodities have fluctuated a lot more widely and more erratically. You would have, if there was a missile shot into Iran, you would have seen the, some changes in price. When the Saudi production facility was attacked and bombed, and what I think it was 20% of production in the world was taken offline for a day or two, that it didn't have some of the tectonic impacts. And so that was, I still don't understand what the ramifications of that is, but we have to remember that our foreign policy has a role to play, and that our adversaries and sometimes our allies are looking to use our still, energy dependence on other people as a way to compel us to behave and act in a certain way. That's why energy independence is so important. And I think that case of Russia and Saudi Arabia is a good example of how they were trying to compel action from us.
You're absolutely right. And, and regardless of the pandemic, that was a serious issue. But as you said, 30 years ago, it could have been a catastrophic issue. But because of the growth of domestic production, because of the security that the places like the Permian Basin specifically can provide in energy, it didn't impact the international markets as much, and therefore it didn't impact the United States as much. And that's something that folks out in our industry try to take to heart and remind ourselves as we're going through downturns like what we're kind of experiencing right now, is that there is a brighter end of the tunnel, but we just don't know how long that tunnel is really going to be.
Advocacy on this is going to need to be continued. I always use the 2016 election and NAFTA as a debate, and we shouldn't have had this issue on NAFTA in the debate, because the U.S., Mexico, and Canada, we build things together. And this is, something that we've taken for granted. And because we weren't continuing to make the case about the importance of North American competitiveness, especially against the Chinese, then people failed to do that. And so I think this focus on, I think 10 years ago, you and I never would have thought that American energy independence was actually a reality. Now sometimes take it as, it's already completely happened and we don't have to worry about it. But we have to continue to make that case and explain to people why this is important. And we also got to show, one of the things that I've learned about the industry is to focus on safety, right? It's like you can't even type at your keyboard long enough unless, something pops up and says, you need to take a break because you may get carpal tunnel syndrome, right? And so this commitment and focus and culture on safety, that's why I think during this pandemic, you realize that in this industry, you haven't had it impacted as much because you already have a culture of safety. You're able to introduce and adopt new processes to stay safe. And I think more people need to see and understand that. And that's something that advocacy by the folks that's part of your association and group have to continue to do, not just at the state level, but the federal level as well.
And continuing on with that idea of advocacy and in particular safety, one of the things that you were really instrumental about that you might want to talk a little bit about were the Department of Transportation grants that you worked on to try to help this region. One of the areas that we have had much larger safety concerns over the past several years is vehicle incidents and accidents and unfortunately loss of life. And for the size of population that we have out here, our numbers were way higher than they should have been. And so much of that was because of the influx of people, the influx of equipment on the roads and driving on roads that weren't intended to be driven on by a lot of these pieces of equipment. But sometimes it takes a while for that kind of infrastructure to catch back up. But why don't you share with everybody a little bit of the work you did there?
Yeah, look, the bill grant, $50 million, being able to secure that for West Texas was important. I think the stat, and don't you got to fact check me on this. I think last year, or it may have been 2018, that 10 to 15% of road fatalities were happening in the Permian Basin, when only in the state of Texas, with only 2% of the population, right? It was the most dangerous place on the roads. And so we were able to work with the Department of Transportation and Secretary Chow on making sure that we get the resources we need, because this was playing such an important role for the entire country. This is something obviously Mike Conaway helped with, and making sure that we had, working with like the I-20 Energy Sector Improvement Safety Plan. Reeves County was another important group that participated in this. And so these are the kinds of initiatives that continue to help. And again, the companies and the individuals educating me on these issues, allows me to be a champion and advocate for these problems in Washington, D.C. And so, a safe and secure energy sector makes our nation more safe and secure. And so working on those projects was good. And TxDOT is a good example of that, of helping, because they were a great partner in this as well.
No, and we greatly appreciate your work and your advocacy at the federal level. We've got great partners from the local, the state, and the federal level on those projects. TxDOT has done a fantastic job of trying to engage out here and doing freight studies and doing corridor studies to really get an understanding of where the needs are, and trying to really develop out the network of roads out here, not just for what's going on now, but for projections going into the future. And that can be difficult with our industry. It can be difficult to get people to really say, well, where are you going to be in 5 years? Just because, as you mentioned earlier, there are so many external factors that impact operations. One of those, also on infrastructure, that has been something that we as an association have been focused on for a while, is electrical transmission and distribution. And it's been something that not a lot of people really understand, that we need a lot of electricity out here to do the work that we do. And most of the electricity that we use out here comes through transmission lines. It's not local generation necessarily. And we've got an amazing resource in natural gas out here that could be used for that generation, but it hasn't really been something that's hit yet. A lot of people might be paying attention to California right now and seeing that for the first time in about 20 years, they're having to order rolling blackouts because they don't have the electrical base to satisfy the demand. We don't want that to be the case in Texas, and we definitely don't want that to be the case in the Permian Basin that is providing energy for so much of the United States and the world. And so we're really appreciative of the advocacy effort that you've done for us in Washington, D.C. on those infrastructure type of areas, and in particular, how that also kind of translates into the cybersecurity side. One of the things I got introduced to early on with my work at PBPA was the concerns that people had out in the field with so many electrical systems. When you have a connection point, in particular, when you have a data connection point, how secure is it? So with your experience and your background coming into work for Congress and really what you've been able to examine and kind of learn about our industry over the years, how do you think we really do as an industry when it comes to those kind of security issues?
Look, I think it's improving, right? And being seen as critical infrastructure. If the high end is the financial services industry, right? Because they were the initial folks being attacked, and most of the focus of people trying to steal a credit card and money, right? I think utilities, and I use that phrase broadly to include all the energy infrastructure as well. And unfortunately, in Washington, D.C., and in most places, when people say infrastructure, they think of roads, bridges, and maybe locks and dams, right? Infrastructure means so much more. And it's being able to power some of these communities, be able to get to sources of power so you can power other communities. And we have an opportunity to help Mexico. We have an opportunity to help the rest of Central America, because we all know that when you when you decrease the cost of turning on your lights, you increase the quality of life. And I'm going to get this stat wrong. The percentage of the world population that still lives without electricity is huge. I want to say the stat was 10%, right? It's higher than zero, right? And you would think in 2020 that number would be zero. And so even in this day and age, we still have to be building that infrastructure. And when you have a resource that can help all communities, right, we need to make sure that we're able to take advantage of it. That requires planning. Nobody thought that we were going to be energy independent and be able to export natural gas. So we didn't have the infrastructure in order to get that natural gas to the coast and get it somewhere where we can take it to our allies in Europe and Eastern Europe. And so we have to be thinking about these broader issues. And that's something I've enjoyed doing, but it's also a threat. Now, when most people still think of cyber attacks, they think of someone trying to steal your credit card information or your social security number to fake you out. But if we look at what the Russians do, and you can use the 2016 election as a perfect example. The Russians were trying to sow distrust in our democratic institutions. They were trying to get Congress to question the executive branch to question states, right? They wanted us fighting ourselves. They want us fighting whether NATO is important, because guess what? There's been 70 years of peace and prosperity in Europe because of NATO. And guess what? Guess who they were keeping down and keeping at bay? The Russians. And the Russians are trying to reestablish the territorial integrity of the USSR. So the Russians are not always, they can use cyber attacks to foment discord. And so think about, being able to take off one plant offline may not have a broad macro impact on the state of Texas or California or cause rolling blackouts or major disruption, but it can cause people to freak out about the safety of this industry. And at a time when there's already debate around the industry, that just foments even more discord. And so that's classic. In the intelligence business, we would call that covert action. And so that's classic covert action. And those are the things that we have to be concerned with when it comes to our industry. And then the Chinese are the exact opposite. The Chinese want to be able to get resources, and they want to supercharge their efforts. So the quickest way to do that, steal what everybody else is doing, learn what everybody else is doing, so they can mimic it somewhere else. So those are the different kinds of threats that we have in this industry. And oftentimes folks are like, hey, we're just out here trying to make a living. But you are part of the national security apparatus, which means you are a target. And so we have to make sure not only are we protecting the control systems, but also, the information that goes back and forth on our business networks.
And so many people out here take great pride in what they do and take great pride in trying to develop the best systems. And I think that if there's one thing that anybody's worked in this industry has learned, that tomorrow we're going to learn something new. There's always something on the horizon that is either going to be a threat, a benefit, or just a challenge that we're gonna have to face in this industry. And we're fortunate to have people that are willing to serve like you have been, to try to represent us and make sure that not only is our voice being heard in Washington, D.C., but that we have intelligent, well thought out policy trying to be put in place to really benefit the people that are working out here in the oil field, the people that are providing that energy security for our country and independence, so that we can have an impact in places like Europe and try to provide some stability. With your 6 years, I'm sure that going into 2020, making that decision that this was going to be your last term in office, this was going to be your last year, you could not have predicted that we would have the 2020 that we've had. But over your 6 years, what is really kind of the one thing you said? You went into office with kind of an anger and a reason to serve from that side. After your 6 years, how do you feel now?
So the things I'm gonna be proud of, right? The things that I will remember is when I was able to battle the bureaucracy for people that needed it battled, right? Spectrum News just did they have a 3-part TV series where they followed me around about doing constituent outreach, and I always had 2 goals in my office: be a leader on national security and the gold standard on constituent relations. When a young woman, 74 years old, calls our office and her husband, who was a veteran, died the previous year, and she was not getting the benefits that were due to her, and she was going to possibly get evicted out of her house, the fact that we were able to step in and solve that problem awesome, right? When a young woman learns she has MS, and because of the kind of MS she has, she's going to require a certain kind of wheelchair, and that wheelchair is not reimbursed by Medicare, we were able to fix that problem. There was kids in El Paso living in colonias who didn't have access to sewage or clean water. It's 2020 in the United States of America to be able to work with the North American Development Bank to do those things. So those are the things that I loved doing, right? And we were also able to be successful in super partisan times that we're in now. I've still gotten 16 pieces of legislation signed in the law, 15, 16, something like that. And we still got some stuff coming. And that's more than what most members do in a 30-year career. And that was under a Republican president and a Democratic president and a Republican speaker and a Democratic speaker, right? So we've been able to show that things can get done when you put a coalition together. And I've learned through crisscrossing the 29 counties of this district that way more unites us as a country than divides us. We oftentimes get so focused on our divisions, and we look at social media, which only 7% of the population uses, as some indication of where the country really is. And we are way more united as Americans than we are not. And when we focus on those things, we are better off, because the only way we've ever gotten big things done in this country is by doing them together. So this was I can sympathize with all those high school seniors and seniors in college that are graduating, this year, because it was kind of that was a bit of a letdown. But we're gonna run through the tape, and just like everybody else, looking to see how the way we operate and live has been changed forever by this pandemic.
No, I appreciate you providing a more positive perspective there. I think that's one of the things that we can all find ourselves not being able to do as well these days, is being able to find that silver lining and figure out where to go forward. And we've appreciated your approach over your 3 terms in Congress and the impacts and the results you've been able to garner. We hope that there are more folks like you up in Washington, D.C. that can really continue to take that baton from you and move it forward, and really be able to help those of us out here that don't always feel so connected to Washington, D.C. Even out here, sometimes it can be a bit difficult to feel connected to Austin or Santa Fe, the 2 capitals for the states where the Permian Basin really is. But in particular in Washington, D.C., so many folks out here really feel that we're out here doing the work on our own, and there's not always somebody there advocating for us. So to have somebody like you having served for us, we're just really appreciative of the work that you've done and been able to put in for people.
Look, there are some great up and coming members of Congress that understand this industry. A good friend of mine, Stephanie Bias in Oklahoma. You have August Pfluger in Midland. You have Wesley Hunt in Houston, Tony Gonzalez here in San Antonio. These are folks that are smart, understand it, recognize the national security impact. So I'm excited about the folks that are going to be able to continue dealing with this. And I'm not dying. I'm just doing something a little bit different. There's other way. I'm looking forward to helping my country in a different way. And I'm excited about that. But I'm going to stay involved in that intersection of national security, technology, and public policy. And so like I said, I'm sure this won't be the last time we have these kinds of conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. We hope not. We hope to see you around, and hope to have you more engaged and involved in a different fashion. We greatly appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. And on behalf of all the participants today, the members of PBPA, thank you for your service to our country. Thank you for the time that you've spent up in Washington, D.C. and throughout your district, and a happy belated birthday.
I appreciate it. And thank you for always taking my call, and the folks on that helped educate me and took me on tours and really helped me understand the industry. So God bless y'all, and we'll see you soon.
Absolutely. Thank you. And everybody, please remember that we are going to continue these on a weekly basis. Next week, we're going to be talking about another federal issue, specifically endangered species. We're looking forward to it. If you have any questions, please reach out to us and let us know. On behalf of OTA and PBPA, thank you, and everybody have a great rest of your day.